going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Crypt Door podcast. I am Tony. Thank you for being here with me today. This episode is different. It's not about a celebrity grave, a ghost story, or a haunted mausoleum. This is real. This is painful. This is about human beings, hundreds of them, whose cremated remains were found left outside in the Nevada desert. No tombstones, no names, just ashes and bone fragments in the dirt. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, what the investigators have found, the updates, and I'll be reading messages from listeners just like you that have sent me emails or comments on social media or in the DMs after my first video on this I did a few weeks ago. And I'll respond honestly to each one. This all started out near Searchlight, Nevada, a quiet desert area about an hour south of Las Vegas. Someone was driving along a dirt road and noticed small grayish white piles on the ground. At first, they thought it was maybe construction material or burned debris. But as they got closer, they realized it wasn't. It was ash. And inside the ash, they saw bone fragments. The authorities were called. The Bureau of Land Management, or otherwise known as the BLM, came out and confirmed it. These were human cremated remains. At first, investigators counted around 70 separate piles of human ashes scattered across the desert floor. No labels, no urns, no names, no markers, just the remains of people left out in the open. I got a message from Laura in Phoenix, Arizona, and she asked, Tony, could this have been someone honoring last wishes, like scattering ashes in the desert? Well, Laura, that's a kind and respectful thought, but no. Most likely, this wasn't scattering. When ashes are scattered respectfully, they're spread into the wind or across the land, not left in little mounds. And investigators found plastic zip ties and broken bits of urn packaging in some of the piles. That means these ashes were bagged or stored and then dumped. Over the next few days, investigators expanded the search area, and the number went from 70 piles to over 100, and then to more than 300. More than 300 human beings, their ashes dumped in the desert outside of Las Vegas. David from Bakersfield, California wrote, Tony, my mom was cremated in Nevada. Now I'm scared. What if hers were dumped like this too? What if what we got wasn't even her? David, I'm so sorry you're feeling that. That's just horrible. And you're not alone. A lot of people are thinking the same thing. I want to reassure you, most funeral homes follow the law. Most treat people with dignity. If you received ashes directly from a licensed funeral home, sealed with paperwork, they were most likely handled properly. What happened in the desert appears to involve remains that were never returned to families or supposed to be scattered, but never were. Investigators brought in palm mortuaries and cemeteries to recover the ashes. Their staff carefully collected each set of remains from the ground. They placed each individual into a container or urn. Today, those remains are being stored safely, indoors in crypt spaces. Away from the weather, away from animals, away from being forgotten again. Jennifer in Henderson, Nevada asked me, Tony, my father's cremation was handled by Palm Mortuary. When I heard they were involved in the story, my heart dropped. Are they the ones responsible? Well, Jennifer, I understand your fear, but no. Palm Mortuary is not accused of dumping the ashes. They were called in afterward to help recover and protect the remains. They're the ones storing them now so they can be claimed if identities are ever known. So how did these ashes get there in the first place? Investigators haven't said who is responsible. No funeral home has officially been named. No arrests have been made. But the cues point towards someone or more than one person in the funeral or cremation industry. Every pile of ashes shows signs of coming from a crematorium. Bone fragments were processed the way machines would grind them. Some had pieces of plastic bags used to close cremation bags. Or the zip ties, I'm sorry. Some had fragments from urns or containers. That tells investigators these weren't burned in the desert. These weren't animal remains. They were cremated human remains processed by a business and then dumped. So the question becomes, if these ashes were cremated properly, who decided this was their final destination? Why the desert? Why like this? Investigators haven't released the name of any businesses or individuals involved, but they have confirmed this was not legally sanctioned, not permitted, and not respectful. Under Nevada law, individuals are allowed to scatter ashes on public lands if done respectfully and without leaving containers or debris behind. But commercial disposal, especially in bulk like this, without approval, is illegal. Brian from Fresno, California messaged me and asked, Tony, why don't they just test the ashes for DNA to figure out who these people were? Well, Brian, that's a good question, and I wish it were that simple. But cremation burns at 1,400 to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, nearly all DNA is destroyed. What's left are bone fragments ground up into ashes, but scientifically, there's very little left to identify a specific person. Unless a metal ID tag, paperwork, or labeled urn was with the remains, there's no easy way to know whose ashes these were. That makes this even more heartbreaking. Hundreds of people, and most may never get their names back. Their families may never know. After recovery, all ashes were taken from the desert and stored indoors in a crypt by palm mortuaries. Each set is kept separate. They're not buried, not mixed, not destroyed. They're being held, waiting in case records or evidence one day reveals who they belong to. But without documentation, that may never happen. Anthony from Las Vegas asks, or says, my uncle passed away in 2022, and we paid to have his ashes scattered near Searchlight. Hearing this makes me feel sick. What should we do? Anthony, I'm really sorry. I know the pain and doubt aren't easy to sit with. What I suggest is this. Reach out to the funeral home that handled this cremation. Ask for documentation. They are required to record where ashes were released, when, and by whom. And if they can't or won't give you that, then you have every right to contact the Nevada Funeral and Cemetery Services Board to request an investigation. So what are investigators doing right now? They're going through funeral home records. They're reviewing cremation logs. Who was cremated? Were ashes picked up? Were they labeled? Unclaimed. They're checking transportation records and who had permissions to transport ashes, where they were supposed to go. They're looking for inconsistencies, ashes that were scattered on paper but never actually were. Rebecca from Carson City, Nevada. Tony, could these have been unclaimed ashes that a funeral home just didn't want to store anymore? Rebecca, that is one theory investigators are considering. Sometimes when no family comes to collect ashes, funeral homes store them. Legally, they are supposed to keep them for a certain amount of time and then respectfully scatter or bury them. But dumping them in the desert with bag ties and urn debris, that's not respectful, not legal, and not acceptable under any law or moral standard. Now let's talk about something people don't want to admit. Possible motives. Why would somebody do this? My opinion, but it could be to save money. Storing ashes takes space and funeral costs money to handle properly. To hide negligence. Someone might have promised families that ashes were scattered somewhere meaningful, but instead dumped them. Or unclaimed remains. Ashes that sat around for years and someone decided to, quote unquote, get rid of them. Rick from Modesto, California, which is not too far from me, incidentally. Tony, do you think this was just one bad person or an entire funeral home involved? Rick, it's hard to say right now, but to dump over 300 sets of remains, that's not a one-time mistake. This happened over time. Someone had access to the cremains, transportation, and the desert location. Whether it was one person or more, it was reported, and it was deliberate. This story has shaken a lot of people. Not because it's a crime scene like you'd see on TV, because it touches something sacred. When someone dies, we trust their remains will be treated with dignity. And this story breaks that trust in a deep, personal way. Maria from Santa Rosa, California. Excuse me, I need to drink something. Tony, my parents were cremated. I can't stop thinking, what if they didn't do what they said they did with them? Maria, I'm so sorry for that pain. And I want to say this clearly. Most funeral homes are honorable. Most do care. But stories like this plants fears in people's hearts. And I understand why. If you want peace of mind, you can request documentation from the funeral home, where, when, and how things were done. You are allowed to ask. It's your right. Investigators have said very little publicly about who might be responsible. No names have been released. No charges filed. No funeral home officially blamed. But law enforcement and the Bureau of Land Management and the Nevada Funeral and Cemetery Services Board are actively investigating. The sad reality is this could take months or even years to fully unravel. And because cremated remains have almost no usable DNA, identifying individuals would be nearly impossible. You never know. One day they might get lucky. There might be something, but, you know. That means in many cases, the only way to connect these ashes to actual names is through paper trails, funeral home logs, cremation permits, records of unclaimed remains, receipts for scattering services that were never actually done. What makes this even more upsetting is that every one of these ashes belonged to somebody. A father, a mother, a sister, a veteran, a friend. And now their ashes sit in limbo, rescued from the desert, but still without names. Samuel from Tucson, Arizona. Tony, I'm a veteran, and all I could think is, what if one of those people served this country and ended up left in the sand like that? It makes me furious. Samuel, first off, thank you for your service. And yes, that's a possibility. Nevada has many veterans. Some people don't have family left when they pass away. But veteran or not, every one of those individuals deserved dignity. The idea that someone fought for their country and then was abandoned like this, it's heartbreaking. And it's wrong. Melissa from Boulder, Colorado. My brother was cremated in Nevada last year. We still don't have his ashes. The funeral home stopped returning our calls. Now I can't stop thinking. Was he one of the victims? Melissa, I'm so sorry you're carrying that weight. It must be unbearable. You have the right to ask questions. You can contact the funeral home again. Ask politely, but firmly. If they don't respond, contact the Nevada Funeral and Cemetery Services Board. You deserve to know your brother deserves to be treated with respect. So, what happens now? All the recovered ashes are being stored individually in crypts by Palm Mortuary. Investigators are trying to connect records with remains. Families can come forward with concerns, but identifying most of these ashes may never be possible. Like I said, they may have a breakthrough one day. Don't know when that would be, but they might hit some luck one day and actually be able to find out. Let's hope, right? Legally, if someone is found responsible, they could face charges for abuse of the corpse, illegal disposal of human remains, fraud if families paid for services that were never provided, violations of federal land laws, since this was Bureau of Land Management property. Paul from Mesquite, Nevada asked, Tony, do you think anyone will actually be punished for this, or is it going to get swept under the rug? Paul, I wish I could guarantee justice. But the truth is, without hard proof, it's difficult to charge someone. The ashes don't have DNA. There's no camera footage made public. No eyewitness's testimony has been released. Investigators will need documents, cremation logs, transport records to tie a specific person or funeral business to this. So yes, it's possible someone will be held accountable, but it's also possible this remains unanswered. And that's the saddest part of all. And I feel for those families. Let me get something to drink here, guys. I've been talking. My throat is dry. So a lot of people have asked me, Tony, is this the first time something like this happened? And the answer is no. There have been similar cases across the country, not identical, but involving mishandling of remains. Excuse me. In Georgia in 2002, the tri-state crematory scandal, over 330 bodies were found dumped in the woods instead of cremated. Families were given fake ashes. In Colorado in 2023, and I've covered this story before, I think I have. A funeral home was found with over 190 decomposing bodies stored in a building. Families thought they had ashes, but many didn't. In Nevada, this is the first time cremated remains, or this many, have been found dumped outdoors like trash. Grace from Sacramento. Does this mean this could be happening more often and we just don't know? Grace, I don't think this is common, but I do think it's possible for things like this to go unnoticed for a long time, especially when it happens in isolated areas. Most funeral homes operate with respect, but when oversight fails, things like this can happen. This is why it's important we talk about it. I also got a message from Aaron in Flagstaff, Arizona. My dad worked in the funeral home for over 30 years. He always told me, we take care of the dead because they can't speak for themselves. He'd be heartbroken to hear this. You know what, Aaron? Your dad was right. That's one of the most powerful things I've heard about this. These 300 people had no voice left. They depended on others for their final dignity, and someone had failed them. So where does this leave us? Hundreds of people were left in the desert. Their ashes are now collected, but their names are still silent. Investigators are working, but answers are slow. Families are left with questions, doubt, and grief. And as a community, we're left asking, how could this happen? Really, how could it have happened? Carla from Oceanside, California told me, Tony, I feel guilty even questioning what happened to my dad's ashes, but after this, I can't ignore it. Carla, you don't need to feel guilty. Asking for the truth about how your loved one was treated isn't disrespectful. It's the greatest sign of love. I want to close this episode by bringing us back to something simple, something human. These weren't just piles of ashes in the desert. These were people. They lived. They laughed. They cried. They had families, stories, memories. And they deserved dignity in death, just as they did in life. Right now, their ashes are no longer out there in the sand. They've been collected. They're being stored carefully, separately, and respectfully, as they should have been from the very beginning. We may never know all their names. We may never know who made the decision to leave them like that. But I believe they deserve to be acknowledged, mourned, and remembered, not forgotten in a desert. We got Michael from Riverside, California. Tony, this story broke my heart. I don't even know any of these people, but I feel like we owe them something, like they mattered. Michael, you are absolutely right. They did matter. Every single one of them. And telling their story, saying out loud what happened to them was wrong. That is doing something. That's making sure they aren't erased. So if you're listening right now and you're angry or hurt or uneasy, that's okay. That means you care. It means your heart still recognizes dignity and decency and respect. Things every person deserves all the way to the very end. If you've lost someone, if you trusted a funeral home, if you're now questioning what happened to your loved one, please know you have the right to ask questions. You have the right to documentation. You have the right to answers. And there is nothing disrespectful about wanting to make sure someone you loved was treated with care. As of now, there are still no arrests. No official suspect has been named. But this investigation isn't over. And I'll be watching for any updates, any answers, and any justice. And when they come, you will hear them here. To the unnamed souls found in that desert, you were not trash. You were not forgotten. You were someone's family. Someone loved you. And whether the world knows your name or not, you mattered. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to sit with something this difficult. And I wanted to thank Tyler Scott had sent me the update to this. So thank you, Tyler, very much for your contribution to this podcast. I am Tony. This has been the Crypt Door Podcast, and I will see you on the next one. I'll talk to you later.